This is footage of Anthony Joshua training for Povetkin, working on his footwork, his positioning, and all that kind of stuff. Dealing with someone coming at him, slinging body shots. Joshua leaning on the guy and trying to push him off in the clinches. This guy here, I'm not sure if this is one of the guys who works with Anthony Yard. It might be. But he was doing a similar thing with Joshua to what he does with Yard, which is go forward and, as I say, try to push Joshua back. Joshua, when you've just watched Tyson Fury on the pads, doesn't look anywhere near as impressive. You know, he's not as supple as Fury. He isn't as fluid as Tyson Fury. His punches are not as long. He's more like watching a Mikey Garcia, you know, a heavyweight version of a Mikey Garcia in terms of the way that he moves. I'm not saying he's exactly like Garcia. I know there are differences, but I'm talking in relative terms here when you compare him to someone like Fury, who's a real slickster. Joshua's moving around on his feet, you know, keeping his balance very good and keeping his hands up like a Mikey Garcia and, you know, throwing calculated shots. But there's not really much upper body movement from Joshua still after all these years as a pro. And one thing I will say as well, though, is Joshua's looking light, very light. And it's interesting that following the Klitschko fight, he's dropped all this weight. You know, in fact, before the Klitschko fight, he was quite heavy. Then in the Klitschko fight, he came in even more heavy. Then he was even heavier again against Takam. But after that, he started losing all the muscle. And I was, if you want to call it, campaigning for him to lose the muscle because I felt like it was a detriment to his fighting ability, putting all that extra muscle on. And many other people were saying the same thing. It became quite a chorus because his promoter Eddie Hearn and even his trainer were being questioned about it by the media, saying, hasn't Joshua put on too much muscle? Shouldn't he lose weight? Well, Joshua is taking heed, and for the second time in a row now, I think he's going to come in light. He was light against Parker, and it appears at the moment that he's still light and probably will come in light against Povetkin, so we'll see. But what is that down to? Some people are going to say it's the juice that they allege he's on. I have no idea. I don't know if he's on juice or not. He could be. Maybe he isn't. I have no idea. Some people can put a lot of muscle on very easily without juice. This is just a fact. Yeah. Some people... Dylan White once called Anthony Joshua a skinny bodybuilder. And what he meant by that is there are some guys who are naturally slim, but when they start lifting weights, they end up putting muscle on without putting fat on because they're naturally slim, so they naturally have a high metabolism. And I've seen that many times in my personal life, people that I know who are naturally slim, but when they start pumping all the weights, they just get ripped and big and they don't put no fat on, you know. Joshua appears to be one of them kind of people. I saw a picture of Anthony Joshua when he was about 18 or something, and he was very slim. There was a picture of him with his boys in a nightclub. And yeah, they said he was around 18 or something like that, and he looked very slim. So he is a naturally slim guy, athletic, and you know, he does have muscularity to him. He's not like a Wilder, but he's more of a naturally slim guy, and he packs all this extra muscle on. And again, some people put muscle on very, very easily. Just because you don't, it doesn't mean that everybody else doesn't. Okay, because there are going to be some people say, I can't put muscle on that easily. Me and my skinny and fat friends, we can't put muscle on like that. Well, you're not blessed like that genetically. Some people can put it on very easily. Now, I'm not a young man anymore, but I can tell you that when I was in my 20s, I was able to put muscle on extremely fast without even taking any supplements. I don't take supplements. Without touching protein shakes, without doing anything, I was able to put muscle on very, very fast. I'm talking about in 2 weeks, I could put on, you know, a significant amount of muscle, which you would notice just in 2 weeks. Yeah. Now, I was not someone who was able to stay as ripped as someone like Joshua, because I'm not a naturally slim person. But, you know, I was always athletic, but I was always the kind of person who, you know, I would put fat on easily as well. When I would start eating and not training, the fat would come on very quickly. Whereas I have other friends who they can eat whatever the hell they want and they never put any weight on. you know. So, but when it came to the muscle, when I'd start doing my push-ups and different type of body weight exercises and resistance training, the muscle would just pop up out of nowhere. I'm already a naturally muscular guy anyway, but the muscles would expand on top of other muscles, and it would look like I'd gained loads of muscle in just a few short weeks, and I had. So some people can do that, other people can't. Joshua, maybe he's just one of those people who can put muscle on, lean muscle and not gain fat, or maybe he's taking something, or maybe it's a bit of both. I don't know. But that's a debate that's going to rage on probably for the rest of Anthony Joshua's career. As far as the way he looks here, though, yeah, I like his balance. I like his movement. I like the technical things that Anthony Joshua was working on. He's improving. I would just like to see more upper body movement and more double and triple jabs I'd like to see from him. Someone who I speak to online quite a lot years ago, he's an American guy called Skylar. Shout out to Skylar. And Skylar was a believer in Anthony Joshua from a very early stage. I mean, way before Anthony Joshua won a world title, Skylar was saying that this guy is the truth. This guy would slump Wilder today. And this is when Wilder was champion and, Joshua was still just a prospect. Skylar was saying that Joshua would slump Wilder now, meaning he would knock him out. And he was a big believer in Joshua. And he described Joshua as being a kind of like a big version of Holyfield. That's the way he described him. And Skylar knows his boxing. He's definitely a boxing man. So I can see some elements of Holyfield there in what Anthony Joshua does, but I think he's moved away from it a little bit over the past, year or so, and he's relied more on brute force and power. Whereas what we're seeing here in this video is maybe a return more to the Holyfield-esque type Joshua, where he's bouncing around on his toes a little bit, popping a jab, faster combinations and all that kind of stuff. Maybe we'll see a return to that. He doesn't want to be stationary against Alexander Povetkin, because Povetkin against a big stationary man is very effective. We saw how effective he was against Mariusz Wach. We saw how effective he was against Johann Duopa. We saw how effective he was against David Price. If you're a big stationary guy, Povetkin's going to get them combinations off on you. So I guess Joshua says, you know what, let me not make myself stationary. Let me be able to move around the ring, catch Povetkin off guard, hit him with jabs and all that kind of stuff. Now, Klitschko obviously beat Povetkin. And Klitschko was relatively stationary in the fight, let's be real. The reason he was able to beat Povetkin the way that he did is because he got away with an incredible and insane amount of holding and leaning, which he should have never been allowed to have gotten away with. It was disgusting, actually, the amount of holding and leaning Povetkin did in the fight. Joshua, will he employ those kind of tactics, all that holding and leaning? He's going to do a certain amount of holding, but I can't imagine he'll do all the holding and leaning that Klitschko did, because that won't go down well with the British fans. In Germany, or sorry, not even in Germany, in Russia, when Klitschko fought Povetkin, I can't remember how the fans reacted, but they should have been disgusted. They should have been disgusted. The British fans were teetering on the brink of turning on Anthony Joshua after the Takam fight and also the Parker fight. They were not happy with the way Joshua performed in those fights. They were not impressed. So I think there's more pressure on Joshua to be entertaining in Britain than there was pressure on Klitschko to be entertaining in Germany. In Germany, they really didn't give a damn about Klitschko being entertaining, from what I saw anyway. Obviously I don't speak German, but the impression I had is that they really didn't care about Klitschko being entertaining as long as he was winning. And there's a precedent for that in German boxing, because they had fighters like Sven Otkar, who was champion forever. And Otkar was one of the most boring fighters you've ever seen in your life. But the Germans would turn out to watch Otkar and they would clap politely when he'd land a good punch. Back then, the German boxing crowds were really, really strange. You know, from the perspective of a British person, you know, in Britain, the crowds are very raucous and animated and lively. In Germany back then, like in the 1990s, the crowds were completely silent. They would sit there in silence, and then when somebody would land a good punch, or when their fighter would land a good punch, they would clap politely, and then it would go back to silence. It was the strangest thing. I'm not exaggerating. Just go back to the 1990s and have a watch of some of the boxing matches which occurred in Germany, like with Sven Otka and all these kind of people. It was such a weird atmosphere back then. Now, since then, the German fans have changed and have, you know, come more in line with British fans, and they're not as raucous as British fans, but they've come more in line with the other European fans. But for a long time, it was just a really weird atmosphere. But still, the point I'm making is they've got that kind of background, so they didn't put so much pressure on Klitschko because they're used to boring fighters. You know, they're used to enjoying boring boxing in Germany. So then they didn't put so much pressure on Klitschko. With Joshua, there's a lot of pressure on him to be exciting from the British public because that's the way that Joshua was marketed from the beginning, as somebody exciting. Yeah, exciting in terms of the way he fights, exciting for the women because he's this big poster boy, this big heartthrob. That's the way he's been marketed in Britain. So excitement is what Joshua's supposed to be all about. And if he's stepping in the ring there and he's not exciting, it's going to be a problem because that's what he's supposed to be. He's not marketed the way Klitschko was as some boxing scientist. No, he's marketed as an exciting fighter. So we'll see. Anyway, drop your comments in the comment section below. Let me know how you feel about everything I talked about in this video. All right, it's Sam and I'm out.